The morning I walked back into Millbrook, Ontario, I told myself I was ready. 22 years. That's how long I had stayed away. Long enough to finish a degree, build a career, fall in love, and almost convince myself that the past had no more claim on me. I was wrong. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because if you're going to understand what happened that Tuesday morning at the law office on Cedar Street, you need to understand where I came from. And more importantly, you need to understand what my brother Daniel did while I wasn't looking. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old. I work as a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm in Toronto. And for most of my adult life, the word family has meant exactly two people: my husband, Marcus, and my best friend, Joelle, who has been more of a sister to me than anyone sharing my actual blood. The rest of it, the house on Birchwood Drive, the man who raised us, the town that watched and said nothing. That was a chapter I had done everything in my power to close. My father's name was Gerald. He was a contractor in Millbrook. He was the kind of man people described as a real straight shooter, and old school. But you know what you're getting? What they meant, but would never say out loud, was that he was a man whose word was the only word that mattered in any room he walked into, including ours. I left when I was 12. Not physically, I couldn't do that yet. But at 12, the version of me that believed things could change quietly packed up and moved somewhere unreachable inside herself. The version that stayed behind learned to be invisible. I stopped having opinions at dinner. I stopped bringing home friends. I stopped asking for things. It was easier that way. Easier than the alternative, which I won't detail here, but which anyone who grew up in a house like mine will recognize immediately. When I was 18, I got a full scholarship to the University of Waterloo. The day the letter arrived, I read it 3 times standing at the mailbox before I let myself believe it. I remember my hands were shaking. Not from excitement, from the very specific fear of what would happen when I told him. He didn't congratulate me. He said, "Who put that idea in your head?" 2 months later, I was on a bus to Waterloo with a single duffel bag, $200 in a birthday card from my aunt in Sudbury, and a silence behind me. So complete, it felt like the house had exhaled. Daniel was 16. He stood on the porch and watched me go. He didn't wave. He didn't say anything. He just watched. That was the last time I saw either of them for a very long time. Over the years, I built something I was genuinely proud of. I graduated. I got a job. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto's East End that smelled like old carpet and radiator heat. And I thought it was the most beautiful place I had ever lived because it was mine. I met Marcus at a work conference in Ottawa. He was a civil litigation lawyer. Quiet, funny in a way that crept up on you. The kind of person who remembered small details about things you mentioned once in passing. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen. No production. Just him and me and a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We were happy. We are happy. That part of my life was real. And no one can take it from me. My father died in March. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, the way that particular disease tends to be. His neighbor, a woman named Barb, who had known our family for decades, found my contact information somehow and called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was eating lunch at my desk. She was kind about it. She said he had asked about me. Near the end, I sat with that for a long time. I didn't go to the funeral. Marcus asked me, gently, whether I wanted to. I said no. He didn't push. That's one of the things I love most about him. He understands that some silences are not invitations to fill. What I didn't know? While I was sitting with my grief that was not quite grief, and my relief that was not quite relief, was that my brother had been busy. The will reading was scheduled for the 2nd week of April. I received a formal notice from the law office Hartley and Associates on Cedar Street because I was listed in the original will. The original will. Drawn up 11 years ago. divided the estate equally between Daniel and me. The house on Birchwood, which had been paid off for years, was worth just over $680. 0 inches the current market, the savings accounts, the truck, the tools and equipment from the contracting business, all of it together came to roughly $820. 000 before fees and taxes. I know those numbers precisely because Marcus looked into it before we drove up. He's thorough like that. Daniel called me the week before the reading. I almost didn't pick up. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. And the last conversation had not ended well. But something made me answer. He was warm. Almost uncomfortably so. He asked how I was. He asked about Marcus. He said he was glad I was coming up for the reading, that it would be good to sort things out as a family. He used the word family 3 times in a 5-minute phone call. I counted. I told Marcus about the call that night. He listened. Then he said, quietly, "Rachel, I want to look at something." He had already started. That's the thing about Marcus. He doesn't wait to be asked. He had pulled the property records, the business registration history, the probate filings, and what he found in a document filed 6 weeks before my father died was a new will, not the one from 11 years ago, a different one, dated January of this year. In this version, Daniel received everything: the house, the accounts, the equipment. I received nothing, not even acknowledgement. My name appeared once, in a clause that stated, and I am summarizing here, that my absence from the family over the years reflected my own choices, and that the distribution of the estate reflected those choices accordingly. I read it twice. Then I put it down on the kitchen table and went to stand by the window for a while. He forged it, Marcus said. Not a question. I don't know that yet. I said, I do. He said, look at the signature. He had already sent the document to a forensic document examiner he knew through work, a woman named Dr. Anand, based in Mississauga, who specialized in signature analysis and document authentication. Her preliminary findings, which arrived 2 days before the will reading, were unambiguous. The signature on the January will did not match the established signature samples from my father's other legal documents, his bank records, his previous will, his contracting contracts going back 15 years. The pen pressure was wrong. The letter form variations were inconsistent. In her professional opinion, the signature had been produced by someone other than Gerald. My brother had forged my father's will. I want to be honest about what I felt when that sank in. Part of me wasn't surprised. That's the part that grew up in that house and learned to see the shape of things before they arrived. But another part of me, the part that had quietly, stubbornly hoped that time and distance had changed, something that part was devastated. Not for the money, for the confirmation, for the proof that some people don't change. They just wait. Marcus asked me what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted to go to the will reading. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, okay, then let's go prepared. We arrived in Millbrook on a Monday evening and stayed at a bed and breakfast on the edge of town because the idea of staying anywhere connected to the family home was not something I was prepared to do. I walked around the main street for an hour while Marcus made phone calls. The town hadn't changed much. Same Tim Hortons on the corner. Same hardware store with the faded awning. Same particular quality of quiet that small Ontario towns have in April, when the snow has mostly gone, but the warmth hasn't quite committed yet. I ran into Barb outside the grocery store. She recognized me immediately. She hugged me, which I wasn't expecting, and told me I looked well. I asked her about my father's last few months. She said Daniel had been around a lot, especially near the end, handling paperwork and taking care of things. She said it with a particular neutrality that told me she had noticed something, but hadn't known what to do with it. The morning of the reading, I dressed carefully. Dark blazer. Good boots. The kind of outfit that says, I am not here to perform grief, but I am also not someone you can dismiss. Marcus wore his court clothes without me asking. We drove to Cedar Street in silence, which was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who know exactly what they're walking into. The law office was on the second floor of a brick building above a real estate agency. The receptionist brought us to a conference room with a long table and a window that looked out over the parking lot. Daniel was already there. He looked older. Of course he did. It had been 4 years. But there was something else. A particular quality of confidence that sat on him like a new coat. Slightly too large. He was wearing a flannel shirt and construction boots. And he had my father's posture, that specific way of taking up space in a room as if space were a resource in limited supply, and he intended to claim his share first. He saw me and smiled. It was a good smile. Practiced. Rachel. He said, "You look great." Daniel. I said. He shook Marcus's hand. Marcus was polite and gave nothing away, which is one of his particular skills. The estate lawyer, a man named Mr. Hartley, who appeared to be in his late 60s and had the careful manner of someone who has delivered difficult news to families for a very long time, arranged himself at the head of the table and set out his documents with methodical precision. He thanked us for coming. He expressed his condolences. He confirmed our identities, and then he said, "I should note that a revised will was submitted for probate, dated January 14th of this year. It supersedes the 2013 document previously on file." He slid copies across the table. I took mine without looking at it. I had already read it. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair. Not obviously. Just enough. The posture of a man who believes the outcome is already decided. Mr. Hartley began to go through the document. The house. The accounts. The equipment. Daniel's name. Daniel's name. Daniel's name. I waited. When Mr. Hartley paused at the end, Daniel looked at me. There was something in his expression, not quite cruelty, but adjacent to it, the look of someone who has been waiting a long time to be the one with the power in the room. "I know this is hard," he said, "but Dad made his wishes clear. You left. You built your own life. He respected that." I looked at him. I kept my voice completely even. "I'd like to submit something for the record," I said. I opened the folder I had carried in and placed Dr. Anand's forensic report on the table. Beside it, I set the comparative signature samples. Beside those, I placed the sworn affidavit she had provided, confirming her findings and her credentials and her professional opinion that the signature on the January will was not my father's. Mr. Hartley leaned forward. He picked up the report. He read it slowly. Daniel had gone very still. "What is this?" he said. His voice was different now. The warmth was gone. "It's a forensic signature analysis," I said. "Commissioned by my husband, who is a civil litigation lawyer. 4 days ago, when we identified inconsistencies in the document you submitted for probate." That's Daniel stopped. Restarted. "That's not, you can't just..." The report identifies 11 specific points of divergence between the signature on the January document and Dad's authenticated signature across 14 years of legal and financial records. I said, "Dr. Anand is a certified forensic document examiner registered with the Ontario Association of Forensic Document Examiners. Her opinion is that the January will was not signed by our father." The room was quiet. Through the window, I could see a pickup truck pulling into the parking lot below. A pigeon was sitting on the brick ledge outside. Mr. Hartley set the report down. He removed his glasses. He put them back on. He looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. Then at Marcus. Then at the report on the table. His jaw was working slightly. The way a person's does when they are running through options and finding none of them acceptable. "This is a family matter," he said. "Finally, you want to drag this out in court over Daniel," Marcus said. He said it very quietly, the way he speaks in depositions. with a particular stillness that takes up its own space in the room. The forensic report has already been filed with the court as an evidentiary exhibit. The estate cannot be distributed under a document that is under active challenge. Mr. Hartley is required to suspend proceedings. Mr. Hartley, to his credit, simply nodded. He had clearly already arrived at the same conclusion. That's correct, he said. I'm required to halt distribution, pending resolution of the authentication challenge. I'll need to notify the court today. Daniel stood up. His chair scraped back against the floor. You're doing this because you're jealous, he said. His voice was rising now, the practiced warmth fully gone. You walked away from this family. You left. You didn't call. You didn't visit. You didn't come back when he was sick. I know. I said, I kept my voice level, and I have to live with that. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I took care of him, Daniel said. For 3 years, I was there. Every appointment, every bad week, I was there and you weren't. He wanted me to have this. He told me, then you should have no problem demonstrating that with a legitimate document. Marcus said, still quiet, still that particular stillness. Daniel looked at him, then at me. Something moved through his expression, not guilt. Exactly. But it's more complicated, cousin. The look of a person who made a calculation and is now watching it fail in real time. He left without saying another word. The door closed behind him with a controlled click that was somehow worse than a slam. I sat there for a moment after he was gone. Mr. Hartley was gathering his documents with the focused discretion of a man who has learned not to react to things happening in front of him in professional settings. Marcus reached over and put his hand over mine on the table. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I thought about the bus to Waterloo, the duffel bag, the $200 from my aunt, the porch where Daniel stood and watched and didn't wave. I thought about all the years in between, and the particular way absence accumulates, and the morning I spent standing at the kitchen window while Marcus looked at documents that confirmed what part of me had already known. I thought about my father, and the complicated truth that I could miss who he might have been without forgiving what he was. That grief is not simple, and it doesn't resolve itself into clean conclusions. And the fact that I was right about Daniel didn't make the rest of it easier to carry. But I had done what I came to do. I had shown up. I had been prepared. I had not let someone erase me from a story I was part of. The forensic challenge moved forward. Daniel hired a lawyer, which I had expected. There were several months of legal proceedings, letters, a formal authentication hearing. Dr. Anand testified. The signatures were examined by a second independent expert who concurred with her findings. In November, the court ruled that the January will was invalid. The estate reverted to the 2013 document. I won't go into the full financial detail because honestly, it isn't the point. What I will say is that my share of the estate was significant, and that Marcus and I used part of it to renovate the spare bedroom in our apartment, which we had been thinking about for other reasons. Reasons that will make themselves apparent in about 5 months. If everything goes well, Daniel did not face criminal charges. In the end, his lawyer negotiated an outcome that I don't fully agree with, but that I accepted because Marcus advised me that the alternative would take years and cost more than it returned. I am still angry about that. I am allowed to be angry about that. But I have learned, over a long time, that anger is only useful when it has somewhere productive to go. Otherwise, it just takes up room. People have asked me, since all of this came out, why I went back. Why I didn't just let the estate go. Stay in Toronto. Let Daniel have whatever he had arranged for himself. And I understand why they ask. I asked myself the same question. More than once. In the months between my father's death and that Tuesday morning in April, the answer is complicated. But the simplest version is this. It was never really about the money. It was about whether I would let someone rewrite what happened, Whether I would stay invisible because staying invisible was easier. Whether the version of me that had learned to take up no space would win. In the end, over the version I had spent 16 years building from scratch in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like old carpet and radiator heat. She wouldn't. She didn't. I drove back to Toronto on a Wednesday afternoon in April, with the window cracked, despite the cold. Marcus beside me. The radio playing something neither of us was really listening to. We stopped for coffee at a rest stop outside Barrie. I stood at the counter and ordered and watched the person behind the till hand me a cup. And I thought, I am here. I am whole. I did not disappear. Some days, that is enough. Some days, that is everything. If you've ever had to fight to be seen by people who were supposed to love you first, if you've ever had to walk back into a room that tried to write you out, you already know what I'm talking about. You don't need me to explain it. You just need to know it's possible to walk back in anyway. And to walk back out with your name, still yours,